Hey, hello everyone. In this video, I'm going to be talking about 3 books that Jordan Peterson always recommends. Stay tuned. Jordan Peterson is a clinical psychologist and professor of psychology, University of Toronto, Canada. The first book on this list is A Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. Viktor was an Austrian neurologist and psychiatrist and a Holocaust survivor. According to Wikipedia, he is the founder of logotherapy, a form of therapeutic treatment including the determination of meaning into one's life. I've personally read this book and made some annotations to it, which might seem pretty annoying to some people. In this book, he not only describes the gruesome experiences that he has gone through in Auschwitz camp, but also writes about the mind states of various individuals who were subjected to equal and sometimes even more horrendous tortures in those camps. A glimpse of that torture was that they were all forced to get naked and they were fed only a couple of pieces of bread for a week and highly diluted soup every now and then, with numerous amounts of hard labor every day and night. And moreover, even if anyone gets sick, they were simply sent to gas chambers to put an end to them. He says that though many of them didn't find any meaning to their lives and their suffering, and some of them committed suicide as well, but the ones who remained strong or nonetheless wanted to live in spite of all the suffering they were going through were the ones who actually have someone to go to or an unfinished work that no other person could finish. That is, they had a physical tangent meaning in their lives. He writes in the book about logotherapy as a psychoanalysis considering a man a being whose main concern consists in fulfilling a meaning, rather than in the mere gratification and satisfaction of drives and instincts. I suggest everyone to go through this book, as you can dive deeper if you read the book for yourself. An Amazon link will be given in the description box for the book to buy it. The second book Jordan Peterson always talks about is The Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. It covers life in what is often known as the Gulag, the Soviet forced labor camp system, through a narrative constructed from various sources including reports, interviews, statements, diaries, legal documents, Solzhenitsyn's own experience as a Gulag prisoner. The Gulag Archipelago traces the history of the system of forced labor camps that existed in the Soviet Union from 1918 to 1956. Despite the efforts by Solzhenitsyn and others to confront the legacy of the Gulag, the realities of the camps remained a taboo subject until the 1980s. Solzhenitsyn was also aware that although many practices had been stopped, the basic structure of the system had survived and it could be revived and expanded by the future leaders. Jordan Peterson has said the Gulag Archipelago is the most important book of the 20th century.
And one of the things that's really surprising to me and that I think is absolutely reprehensible, is the fact that this is not widespread knowledge among students in the West, any of this, and it's because your education, your historical education, if you started to describe it as appalling, you would barely scratch the surface. These were the most important events of the 20th century, and they're barely covered at all in standard historical curriculum. You know something, I would presume, about World War II and about the terrible situation in Nazi Germany and the death of 6 million gypsies and Jews and homosexuals in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany. But my experience with students has been that none of them know anything about what happened as a consequence of the repression of the radical left in the 20th century. And I believe the reason for that is that the communist system had extensive networks of admirers in the West, especially among intellectuals, and still in fact does, which is also...
Russian schools issued the book as required reading, and also Russia's president Putin called the book as much needed book. The third and last book that Jordan talks about, Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. I personally read this book, and trust me, this is not the most easiest book to read. Though it is a fiction, this is the only fiction book on this list. Peterson has always called Dostoevsky as an extremely intelligent writer who is not only good at writing artistically but also as a man who depicts human psyche in the most accurate way.
And so I would say, with regards to fiction, if you take someone like Dostoevsky, who I think is a favorite of mine, by the way, I would highly recommend that you read all 5 of his great novels, because they are unparalleled in their psychological depth. And so if you're interested in psychology, Dostoevsky's the person for you. Tolstoy's more of a sociologist, but Dostoevsky, man, he gets right down into the bottom of the questions and messes around.
This book is about a young man who is a college student but finds his life boring, and he sorts out to do something good by murdering a woman whom he considers as vile and futile.
Dostoevsky's characters, this character named Raskolnikov is a character in Crime and Punishment, and Raskolnikov is a materialist rationalist, I would say, which was a rather new type of person back in the 1880s, and he was sort of taken by the idea that God was dead, and convinced himself that the only reason that anyone acted in a moral way, in a traditional way, was because of cowardice. They were unable to remove from them the restrictions of mere convention and act in the manner of someone who rose above the norm. And so he's tortured by these ideas. He's half starving. He's a law student. He doesn't have enough to eat. He doesn't have much money, and so, you know, he's not thinking all that clearly either. And he's got a lot of family problems. His mother's sick, and she can't spend him.
Though this book becomes tedious and slow at some point, especially during the family discussions, and also some of the points, some of the thoughts to himself, only a few thoughts to himself are boring, except that part. The book is splendid. I loved reading this book, and I would even reread this in the future. I would highly recommend this to anyone interested in psychological fiction material. Mind it, it's a fiction, but it's not an easy coffee table read, so it might not be a cup of tea for everyone. Thanks for watching. Subscribe for more, like the video, comment down, and thanks for watching.